Hello, folks. This is the X's and O's of Life interview edition on a Sunday. I usually don't do these on Sundays. It just kind of ended up coming up, and I'm definitely happy about it. So, um, I have Steve Cloward on the line, and I'm pretty sure I didn't butcher that
Perfect.
because in my head I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Because I did the exact same thing with my last fella, and I'm like, his name wasn't too difficult either, but you start seeing people's names, you're like, oh boy, don't say it wrong. Um, so he's kind of an open book. As you guys know, I don't really look too much into the profiles. I get a general idea, and I let the guests kind of fly with it. And I so it looks like from what I've read, and if you're seeing this guy, you look at him, he doesn't look like he did some time, but our man did some time here. So we're gonna delve into that a little bit. Um, he had some addiction issues there, and now you're in the real estate game, right?
I was in the real estate game for about 15 years, had a real estate appraisal firm.
Okay.
Uh, and that's actually, I'll get into that, what the
Yep.
indictment was tied to and stuff. But yeah, I do a little bit of flipping here and there if the right deal comes along, but I'm not proactively engaged in it at the moment.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna let the man take the reins here and tell us his story, and we'll ask questions and giggle and do all the fun things we usually do. So, Steve, go ahead. This is your show now.
All right. Well, I'll try to, do a quick 40,000 foot view, so to speak, of kind of how I grew up and, how the addiction thing came into play. And then, when people hear, I have a podcast, when people hear the title, they instantly think that, oh, well, he went to prison because of addiction, because it's called Life After Addiction and Indictment. But I was actually totally sober for several years when this
Yeah.
indictment went down. But, I was born into a middle class family that was in the Mormon religion. Been
Oh,
living in
really?
Utah. Yeah, I've been living in Utah since I was 6 years old, but I was born in California on an Air Force base.
Huh.
And so growing up with that religion, a certain kind of culture, there's a lot of positives to it. But, the last 4 years, I've done a lot of diving down deep onto that issue. And
Really?
that's another topic for another day, but it's very, very, very cold. It's a cold flat out, let's be honest.
Yes, it
And
is.
very, very, very nefarious things that go on that, it's sad. It's sad to me because so many people that I know and care about and where I live I'm in Utah County,
Right.
BYU, Salt Lake City's 20 miles up the freeway. I mean, it's so most people I'm around on a day-to-day basis are fully, brainwashed and all in, and they think I'm the lost soul, but anyway, so the reason I bring that up is because I did go on a Mormon mission when I turned 19 to South Carolina and didn't want to go, but figured I was going to eventually. So let's go get it over with, which, because back then, this was in 1987. If you didn't go, it was a lot different than it is today. And if you came home, it was way different than it's today because that's, it's just become a lot more okay, I guess, or accepted. And it happens a lot. Where back then it didn't happen very often at all. So the pressure to do certain things, got me to do something I truly didn't want to. Um, and so after a few months of being out there, I just kept waking up with these horrific gut aches, just intense pain in the lower right side of my gut. And let's tell my, parents in letters. I had a girlfriend that I was tight with. So I'm telling them that I think I should come home. And, here I am. I'm a pretty prideful dude. And the last thing I was going to do was just quit because I didn't want to be there. I mean, I would have loved to, but that wasn't it. Something was going on, but nobody knew. The doctors, I went to one doctor out there. He didn't think anything was wrong. Couldn't, come up with anything. Long story short, my parents were writing me, girlfriend's parents writing me, if you come home, you'll know what it's like to be dealing with life on your own in a sense. You won't be able, you won't be seeing my daughter, all sorts of crazy stuff. Well, I finally decided I just had this, I don't know, I just knew I was supposed to go home, for lack of a better way to put it. And so my dad finally said he would accept it if I waited for a certain time period because he thought this conference that they have biannually would change things if I listen to this one coming up in 3 weeks, And anyway, I was so depressed that I just wanted to go to sleep until it was time to go home because I already knew I was going. So why should I wait till this time period? And one morning I get up, my companion's in getting, showered and stuff. And I go into the kitchen, take a whole handful of aspirin and go back to, reading or whatever I was doing. And because I just wanted to be sick, I wasn't thinking I want to kill myself. I wasn't thinking anything like that. I just wanted to freaking sleep. I was just so depressed. And so we ended up getting ready and going out. And as we're driving back on our bikes for lunch, my ears are ringing. I'm just kind of starting to lose it, and kind of feel like I was having a mental breakdown in a sense, And so we got to our apartment and I just went right to the room and just kind of grabbed onto the side of my bed because I just had this rage. I just wanted to start destroying shit. And anyway, I finally tell him and, he took, called a friend in the area that we knew and took me to the hospital. In the meantime, my parents are being told. So my dad flies out. He gets there the next morning. As soon as he sees me, he was writing me letters telling me how, my life's going to be if I were to come home. You'll know what it's like to pay rent. You'll know, basically you'll be on your own and don't expect a lot of support from us, which is pretty sad, And when he saw me, I went out, I weighed about $156 sopping wet when I went out. And when he got there, and this is only 3.5 months later, I was about $125. He saw me and he just started bawling because I was kind of jaundicey, gray looking, Anyway, so late that afternoon, we flew home, and 2 nights later, I'm eating dinner, and they still hadn't released me. I was on technically a honorable medical leave, even though I knew I was done. I wasn't going back, period. And my gut just hurt so damn bad. My appetite just evaporated. I couldn't eat or anything. So my mom took me to her cousin who was a physician, and he said, "Oh, probably had an appendicitis. Take him to the hospital." And so take me in. I think they're going in for appendicitis, 20-minute surgery. 2 hours later, my dad's out there kind of panicking, and he sees a doctor friend of his walk in, and he asked him if he'd go and see if he could find out what was up. And about 20 minutes later, he came back with the actual surgeon, and that's when I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And they had cut out 16 inches of my small bowel that was ulcerated and perforated. So I tell you all that because that's when the opiates started. Because of the Crohn's stuff after that surgery, obviously I was on pain meds, and I realized that they helped me not only with the pain, but after that was gone, I just was more, I guess they metabolize in my brain different than the average person, I don't get tired. I don't get, groggy or any of that. It's almost the opposite. And, I think I also had social anxieties and stuff. And so it just made it easier for me to cope with things and deal with life in a sense. And so that's how that started. And then, I call it dancing with the devil for 14 years. And there was one experience where I was driving to meet a buddy at a golf course to hit some balls. And as I turned at the base of what's called Provo Canyon to go down this main road down to the golf course, I went numb from like my neck down. And the only thing I can remember the next thing I can remember was I was like looking down and I could see my car with my body in it. And of course that tripped me out. I got to the golf course, was just a couple miles down the road, and I'm obviously a wreck. I see my buddy and he knows something's wrong. So I kind of tell him, and my gastroenterologist, who I'd seen for my Crohn's over the years, became a friend. His son used to work for me. And so I knew where he lived. So I just said, we got to go see Dr. Dickens, and I got to go tell him what's up and see what, I don't know what to do. Cause this was back, when opiates addiction wasn't a huge topic. I mean, it was out there, but it was also looked very down on. It wasn't like it is today. And at this point, this was in 1996, I believe. And so here I am, like scared shitless. I'm ready to be done. And he had a function at his house. And so I was talking, he lived in a gated community. So I'm talking through him to the speaker. And, he let me know I couldn't come in and talk to him then, but he said, let me call my buddy. So he called an internist friend of his, and I had never heard of OxyContin at this time. It was very new on the market. And so his internist said, well, I'm out of town, but I'll be back in 3 days. I could see him, whatever day that was. But in the meantime, prescribe him 10 OxyContin, and, I'll see him then. So here I am as somebody who had been fighting this, dance with the devil, who I was very functioning addict for the most part. But I didn't know what to do for help the times that I thought, I was kind of sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so this happens, and it was like that. I'm ready. I'm not looking to die. I'm not looking to be living this life. And when this doctor then prescribes the OxyContin with my Crohn's, and I had some back issues at the time, it's like, as an addict, all of a sudden that switch in my mind went from being a red light back to green. And I started buying into the stories of, yeah, I need them, and all those kind of things. And so for the next about 4 years, I continued on, and because that doctor thought I was self-medicating, which there's truth to that for sure. But he also believed he could taper me off because I was self-medicating, for depression. And, there's no such thing as tapering off. I mean, maybe if you're in an environment where, they're working with you day to day and like you're an inpatient somewhere, but, it's all or nothing. You're only tapering because that's the way you need to do it, so that you don't, have such a bad reaction. Typically, you're not going to die from opiates, but going cold turkey, but it's miserable as hell. And that's a big reason why you continue. So finally, July 27th, 2000, I went and did rapid detox up in Seattle, and that was the end of it. But it was a terrible journey, and I don't wish that on an enemy. It's just that brutal. It's all consuming. I've always been an entrepreneur, and one of the things that the processes that they put us through in actually in aftercare was really going over and trying to really figure out, with the time and the money you spend on your addiction, what kind of money had you wasted, and it's absolutely staggering when you go through that process. But, the time itself, the negative energy that you're being sucked into all the time, it's terrible. Like I said, I was overall very functional. In fact, I had a friend who he leased one of the offices inside my office building where my appraisal firm was. And one day, I was kind of sick and tired of stuff. And he was the kind of guy that, he was an active Mormon, and so there was no judgment. I could just be me and talk to him, not worry about being, the shame or guilt or all the bullshit. And I was telling him, man, Greg, I'm taking these pills, and I need to stop, and he was like, well, with what you're doing, you just rebranded your company, and, you're kicking ass. Like, what's there to worry about, And it's just, and I don't, I wouldn't blame him for anything, but he didn't know any different. He didn't understand the depth of what addiction is and whatnot. But, and it's crazy because he ended up having a son that fought that stuff. And so he did get an understanding, and I was able to help out a little bit. But, just one of those things that it's tough. But the key, for anyone listening that is dealing with it or knows a loved one or whatever, you can't make anyone stop. You can't talk anyone into stopping. They have to make that choice. But the key to staying sober, getting sober is step number one, and it's a very important step. But if you don't understand why it is that you're doing what you were doing, you have to figure out that underlying reason, or you're not going to stay sober. That's just a fact. I mean, maybe there's the very crazy anomaly that would, beat that, but it doesn't matter if it's gaming, porn, sex, eating, exercise, alcohol. It doesn't matter what you're abusing. There's a reason that we do what we do. It's, to escape something, or, to cover the pain of something or the uncomfortable of something. And so that's really the biggest key. But that's really the piece of, my addiction and how I got started and how it was. I, as you mentioned, I did go to prison, and it's crazy because there's so many things I did using opiates that would have put me in prison.
Right.
But the reason I went to prison, I can say without a doubt, I wasn't guilty of doing anything to put me there. But I'm a believer that there's no accidents in life, everything kind of happens for a reason. And, I believe the reason for me was I just needed that time out, even though I feel like it was totally unfair. It rocked my world, turned my life upside down, as you can imagine. And I was stuck for like 8 years after. But, you get everything taken away, especially your freedom. And it doesn't take but hours, maybe a day or two, to really truly understand what matters most. And so often, the things, particularly the people that matter most, are those that we take for granted, you know. And man, that was a tough pill to swallow, because like I say, I needed a timeout. And I think it happened for me because I was so into work, money, and stuff. That's what was defining who Steve Cloward was. And I believed that, I believed that that's, for me to feel good about who I was, I felt like I had to show other people instead of learning who I really am, because I am not Steve Cloward. That's just the name, and until you can really understand who you are and love yourself, you truly can't love other people, the right way. It's just, it sounds kind of weird, but that's what I had to do. So it took a ton of inner work. And, you know, like I say, I spent 14 and a half months in prison. That was the one thing I was grateful for. My addiction, the only one thing was, in, federal prison, they do have this program called the Residential Drug and Alcohol Program. And that's one of two things that can get you out early. It's either that or, testifying or be, uh, testifying against somebody else or something like that, and so luckily I qualified for that. And because I had a 33-month sentence and did 14 and a half months. But like I say, I had to get in there to look the man in the mirror and to finally get honest with who I was and what the stories I believed. I believe everything, success and failure, comes between the 6 inches between our ears. And when I got out of prison, I didn't understand how broken I was. I remember my dad, he was a dentist, and when he retired, I remember him telling me that one day we were talking, and he's like, it's strange. I feel like I lost my identity. I'm not Dr. Cloward. And, that also shows how we as human beings, particularly male, I believe, feel our self-worth or our identity by the profession or the job title, the industry we're in. And man,
Ego's a son of a bitch.
that's right. That's it. And when I got out of prison, I totally understood what he was saying, because, even if it was real estate appraiser, I mean, it's not that it has to be doctor or attorney or anything else. It's like, this is what I do, and now I don't even know what I do. I couldn't do that anymore. And so I totally got it. And so, as an individual who had been pretty successful, fairly involved, in community things, and I used to enjoy going to fundraiser dinners and things like that. And I mean, I love to give. That's the thing that makes me feel fulfilled the most. It doesn't always have to be financial. It can be time, it can be anything, but I was able to do those kind of things. And now all of a sudden the script had flipped, and here I was at times getting help. And that's very humbling, and in fact, me and my wife kind of used to have a real beef about that, because I finally got to the point I could deal with that. She couldn't. She wouldn't. And I had to point out that you remember, I would just ask her a question. How did you feel when we went to this? There was one particular charity adoption center of change, and we donated some money that allowed this mother and this her child now that she adopted, and she adopted her when she was like 6, and she was like 7 years old now. That basically at the auction we paid for the Disneyland trip. Now I don't say that to brag. I say that because how did that make me feel? How did that make my wife feel? So I remember asking that question. Do you remember when we did that? How did it make you feel? Do you think that blessed our lives in any way? Of course she thought it did. So I said, well, even though it's hard, do you think that the people that have offered to help you in this situation when I was gone, or this situation since I've been home, do you think they're doing it because they just feel so sorry for you? Or do you think they're doing it because they can, they want to? And you're not allowing that. I mean, it's all perspective. So they want to do something. You can call it karma, you can call it God, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it universal law, you can call it energy. It's the law of reciprocation. I mean, when you give to others, the law of reciprocity, whatever, you're cheating them in a sense. And, just giving her that perspective didn't change it really, like that, but it also, she understood. And then, at times she was able to accept some help, but still it's humbling. But at the same time, like I say, there's things we have to learn. And if you understand this life is nothing but it's a school in a way, what is it we're learning?
I'll say it again. Ego's the son of a bitch.
It's everything, man. That's what I mean. I can point to that in every situation in my life that's held me back, period. And I fight that sucker every day still. I mean, there's times
those fellas do.
I place with God. I'm like, after what I've been through, I've been humbled to my knees in ways that I've never even thought it was possible. But yet here I am acting like this prideful douchebag, it's like, it's crazy, but, then staying stuck for 8 years was crazy, because when you reached a level of success, and success, when I say that, those listening, don't think I'm talking money all the time. That's needed. I believe it's important. I believe it's something that allows us to do things for ourselves, for others. And without it, I mean, we all have to have it. If you're an asshole before you have money, you're going to be a bigger asshole with it.
Yes, you will.
Good person without it, you're going to likely be a better person with it and do more.
I always love the people that say, "Oh, if I hit the lottery, yeah, okay." You say that you won't change, but you go ahead and get that infusion of 60 million in your account and see how much of a douche you are.
Yeah, and see how fast you're broke too.
Yeah, well, there's that too.
It's but yeah, it is tough, and but so for 8 years I was like struggling what to do, struggling to make money, and until I really owned everything that I had in my life and admitted to myself that everything I've been through, everything I have to this moment right here today, is strictly 100% of choices I've made. Nobody else. When I was in prison for the first few months, I certainly was blaming my attorney, blaming the main guy in my case. And until I got over that and owned it, whether I didn't do anything illegal or not, I still engaged with someone who was doing things. And when I figured out what truly was happening in the way that the government and the law would look at those situations, I actually, wrote a letter, but I shouldn't, and that's a whole nother story, but I shouldn't have wrote a letter to this division of real estate. I should have freaking gone and talked to them, and so when you realize that something's wrong, you need to address it. Otherwise, whatever circumstances take place, they're on you as much as they're anyone else. And so, when I finally accepted that and decided to let go of it, and it got easier to deal with it, because going to prison was the first time in my life where I can honestly say it was the first situation that I wasn't able to solve or deal with. Had no control really of the outcome.
That's what it was.
It was so brutal. And, the attorney I had hired, I fired him after plea. Wanted to fire him 8 months earlier, but out of fear, not thinking it would possibly negatively affect the situation, I didn't. And this is a guy who had done legal stuff for me for years that I thought was actually an attorney that, could really trust, and on and on. I should have never taken my case because he's not a criminal defense attorney. But again, everything happened the way it was supposed to. On a side note, I was so bitter at him for so long. And when I got home, I even talked to attorneys in prison and wanted to go after him when I got home, and met with a couple attorneys when I got home. One of them felt like I really had a good shot, but nobody would do it because it's like this code, And but I wrote this scathing review on Yelp about a year after I got home, and out of the blue, like 6 or 8 weeks later, somebody responds to that. This is gonna blow your mind. This guy is a high-profile attorney out of Park City. I mean, he's done legal stuff for some of the, Peekaboo Street. I mean, some big time celebrities, also some huge developers. And she tells me about him. They were boyfriend, girlfriend when he was in Alaska. I'll make this really quick because this is a total sidebar. And she had gotten pregnant. They had been talking about marriage finally. She got pregnant. He vanished, disappeared. That's when he moved to Utah. Hadn't spoke to her, no contact. So she tells me all this, what a piece of shit he is. Fast forward now, I got out of prison 13 years ago next month. About a year ago, out of the blue, she messages me. And he had gotten into his daughter's life when she was graduated from high school. This was about 3 years ago. This is sick and sad. And starts whining and dining her, talking to her into coming to Utah and visiting, and then would take her to the Jazz games front row and take her on vacations. And of course, he's trying to manipulate and work her to go against her mother. But it gets worse than that. She then tells me that he freaking rapes his biological daughter.
See, I knew that was going to come in.
So he is right now in the middle of it, and karma is kicking his ass, and he's going down. It's crazy. I mean, it's unreal, but it blew my mind. But at the same time, it's like, I'm just a big believer that there's universal laws that we either understand and that they're real.
I'm a big believer in karma. Good shit happens to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. Now, those things can cross streams, absolutely, but if you stay on that good path, generally speaking, good things will happen to you more than bad things.
Absolutely.
That's kind of how I believe it. Is there some divine intervention in there? Yeah, maybe. Is it just the universe kind of balancing itself? Maybe. I don't care. All I know is generally that's how shit works, and I'm okay with it. I'm not going to really read into it.
Yeah. Yeah. If we just understand that we are just energy. That's all we are. I mean, and so, it's like some of the greatest teachers out there. I can't remember exactly who it was. It's on the tip of my tongue. If it comes to me, I'll tell you. But it's like, what we think about most of the time is what comes about. You look at these, I think of particular people who are just always kind of in the victim, whiny, negative mode. You see them, they kind of have this little scowl on their face. They continue to get life that's like that. The people that, guys locally here, there's a lot of wealthy people here, and one I used to do some appraisal work for that started Vivint, home security, and Vivint Solar sells out for $4 billion. I mean, I used to call him the golden boy when we were doing appraisal work for him when he started Apex Mortgage, and we used to call him the golden boy back then. It's not that he was a golden boy; it's that, and to be honest, even if he were to hear this, I'd say this to his face. He's no sharper than the next guy, but he knows how to bring good people around him. Right. He knows how to go after it and make it happen. And so he continues to get results, that are different than the person that's a victim. I was in a victim stance for 8 years after I got out of prison. I thought
it's hard not to be that either. I mean, to be honest. I mean,
but I thought someone was coming to save me. No one's coming to save nobody, but you got to save yourself, And once I started working on my mindset, then things finally flipped for me. Doesn't mean everything's easy. It's still tough, absolutely. But I think that's, if I could say one thing that I learned through everything I've been through, there's two words. I'd say gratitude and mindset. I was sitting in prison and I was so depressed for the first few months. And this lady wrote me a letter. I was friends with my mother. I'd never met her, never heard of her. And she wrote me religiously once, maybe twice a month, but at least once a month, sent me several books. The first letter I got from her, she said, "Steve, I do not know what it's like to be in there. And I would never pretend to. But if you can think of 3 things every night when you lay down to go to bed, that day that you have to be grateful for, I think that'll help." So I started that night, and immediately everything shifted. It's because when you're out of self and being grateful, it doesn't matter if you're grateful that you're in prison, but there's air conditioning. I mean, because there's a lot
Right.
there's a lot of horrific stories out there, and you can't be depressed, you can't be angry, you can't be sad, mad, you name it, if you're grateful, and that did more for me than anything, and then obviously, like I mentioned, after I was battling for 8 years and, kind of thinking I'd hire the right person and they'd make my business go that much better and whatever. Once I decided to just work on my mindset, I really had to literally rewire my mind. And once I started doing those things, then everything changed.
Now, I know people are going to be curious about this, and you can either do it or not. It's completely up to you. You can be as vague as you want. What got you into prison?
Yeah, it was a mortgage fraud case. I'll tell, I have nothing to hide about that.
I just don't know like the legalities behind it, if like you're allowed to speak on it or not.
Oh yeah, I can speak on anything. Screw them anyway. I had a real estate appraisal firm, residential real estate. I had 6 appraisers in my office here locally, and then 2 in an office in St. George, Utah. And I was actually not appraising, anymore personally. I was doing real estate development and I was importing stuff from overseas, but I mean, I was still, doing the books side of it. The financial side really is all. But one day I had an investigator come in and he handed me this gag order. And then the order said that any appraisals that they, requested to see, particularly of other appraisers, because my office was doing a lot of review work on other appraisals, which is other appraisers. And so we were doing that. They didn't ask for a ton, but, would give them to them. And then a year later, that same investigator, who, if you're a target of an investigation, is supposed to tell you, you're supposed to know that, he hands me a 19-count indictment. And basically it was conspiracy indictment to commit mortgage fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, all these other things. And that's what happened as far as the indictment and what it was for. But what the issue was is the guy that was ordering the appraisals, who was someone I knew, his parents died in a plane crash in 1979 that my parents were supposed to be on. They backed out the night before, and that's once again a whole nother story. But so there was a guilt by association, but I was also dumb enough to give him add him to my, the time I had a higher end American Express account. And he had been on another friend of mine's, had a similar account. And that guy got tired of chasing the money every month to get it paid. Even the guy had it. It was just one of those things. It just, doesn't care about other people, I guess, if he's going to make you do that. And so I was dumb enough to do it because he offers, I'll pay for my card, which is $1,500 for an extra card on that kind of an account. And then I'll pay your annual fee and your other card for your wife, which is, I think that was another $6,000. So it's like, okay, I knew he had the money, And so this is the guy that's doing these double closes. And what that entails is the realtor that was in this case, he did all the high-end homes in Utah County, particularly. He was kind of known as that guy. And there was a specific gated community in what's called the Provo River Bottoms. You can Google this and find Provo River Bottoms, and you'll find my case and read about it if you want to. Basically what happens is the realtor goes to somebody that has a home and says, hey, say it's $1.3 million or $1.4 million. Hey, I've got someone to buy that for 2.1 or something. And most of you are probably thinking right then, well, they're not gonna be able to do that because you can't appraise it for that. The house is a $1.3 million. How are you going to get it to 2.1 or whatever? Well, there was one particular house built in this gated community, built by the homeowner. So basically, it was not a spec that was put on the MLS and then sold, so it doesn't have the actual info on the MLS for that type of transaction. However, the realtor could put it on the MLS with the actual information if he chooses, which is what happened. And this was I think it was at the time a $2.3 million comp. And it was very similar in size, within 200 to 300 square feet of these other homes that were 1.3 to 1.4-ish. And so guys in my office did the appraisals. I didn't even do them. But because that is such a great comp, it's literally less than, a block, 2 blocks max, because it's just one development, one subdivision. And it was within a year or two of the year built, so within 200 to 400 square feet. So it's an ideal comp. So you can, out of the 3 comps that are required, you can put tons of weight on that one comp because it is so similar. And so it made it so you can get a value like 2.1 or 2.2, which we did. Now in jumbos, they always require 2 appraisals. So my office had 2 guys out of my office did them. The one, and they always fund off the lowest, which they funded off my guys. And we charged the standard for a big jumbo, $1,200, where the other appraisal I found out later, they were being paid $5,000, which is enticement to get a number. And they were between $300,000 to $500,000 higher on their value than we were. But because
Froze up here.
they, they fund that was ultimately.
There you are. Okay. Oh, wait, froze up again. Oh, Jesus.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good now. You just had like you were right at the enticement part.
Okay, so these other appraisers, two different appraisers, were getting, between 300 to 500,000 more than my guys were getting. They were getting paid $5,000 for the appraisals, which is, he's obviously influencing them by paying them so much to hit a number. But they fund off the lowest. So obviously the lenders funded off my guys' appraisals, which means we were, my appraisal office, which was named in the indictment, and me personally as the owner, even though I didn't do the actual appraisals, that's how I got thrown into this. And so then what happens, how it's a double close for those that are curious. So that one homeowner that the realtor went to and was told, hey, I can sell your house for this much, which, I mean, shit, they may not want to move, but if they can make, 600,000 to 700,000, that's pretty enticing to anybody. And so that's what would happen. But then so they would do a double close. And I happened to, my first sellie was the title company guy who I didn't know. I ended up knowing of him and knew his brother-in-law real well because I went to high school with him. But they would close on the first one, and then they would get what's called a straw buyer buying it right behind it, the first close, and using that spread on the equity. So say you have to have 20% equity on a big jumbo like that. Then if there's 800,000 equity coming out, which say it's 1.3 to 2.1, then they've got to have 420 down, 20% of the 2.1. But they're able to suck that equity out so they can use that for the down. And then the guy doing this deal is making the spread in between. So the other 400K left over, 380, whatever it is. That's how those deals work. And what's crazy about it is there was a ton of that stuff going on in the mortgage world, not just Utah at the time. Not saying it's okay, but it was so strange because once I realized what was happening and truly understood it, and from an appraiser standpoint also, so the listeners understand, is you're required on the MLS. We always put one particular line in all appraisals. The MLS records are deemed to be accurate, but not guaranteed. then the next step that we always would do is call the realtor to verify, which 99.9% of the time they're saying, because they're the one that posted the data on there. But that just also is the extra step that we were taking to cover our butts that, hey, we put the data that we were told is accurate, and that's what we're required to do. And so that's how those deals went down. And, in a conspiracy, they've got to have a title person, a mortgage person, appraiser, the buyer, the straw buyer. And there was a lot of unindicted co-conspirators, the straw buyers. But yeah, it was a mess, and it was very stressful, and it also gave me an insight of which we're all seeing now. And not to bring up a crazy subject, but you're dealing with the federal system, and it's a one-sided system. When I mentioned I wanted to fire my attorney, and I finally did after I pled, my dad had asked a friend in our neighborhood where I grew up if he would defend me, prior to me firing that attorney, because we're trying to find who I'd use after. And this guy defended, they were called the Lafferty brothers, two brothers who had done a bunch of murder. And he said,
I don't know why, but I feel like I've heard of them people before. I don't know why, but
they were whack. I think there's a Netflix series on them. I can't think of the title of the movie now. Okay. They're wacko Mormon guys. And but his response to my dad was, Sherm, I quit criminal federal defense 13 years ago because you can't give your client a fair defense the way the system works. It's like I say, that state investigator who handed me that gag order and then the indictment, there's one hearing that my attorney did kick ass. In fact, that real estate guy slipped me a note and said, where did you find this guy? Like I said, he was a bright guy, but he was the most eccentric son of a bitch I've ever met. But he crucified this dude on the stand. In fact, he perjured himself. But he was he was the prosecutor's witness. So unless they're going to go after him, it doesn't matter. So yeah, it was a very, very bitter, ended up kind of sweet in many ways time, because like I say, I learned some things I needed to learn. And, even though I knew most of those things, that doesn't mean I was,
knowing it and living it are two different things, man.
Amen, man. I mean,
that's the thing. Like it's funny because you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, yeah, no, I understand." It's like, yeah, you don't understand shit. You haven't been through it. Like, wait till you go through someone else's kind of shoes, then you can probably then say you understand, but still, you probably don't.
Yep, it's so true.
That's funny. So how are things now? Like, I mean, obviously you have come out the other side. How is life treating you nowadays?
It's pretty dang good. I think everything comes down to a choice. We can choose what we make of things, even in bad times, even in tough times. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, so things are still, times are up and down, things are pretty good right now. This might shock some people, but just this last June, I celebrated my 33rd, anniversary. So I'm still married.
I was going to ask you really quick about that. Like, you must have a badass broad at home, man, to deal with ex-con Steve over here.
Pretty crazy. Yeah. Especially, she was a nurse, and my physician, nice. I was, she ended up getting her first job and only job at the physician that my parents knew very well, that was my physician as a kid. And, so here I go through addiction. In fact, there were some dumb things I did in that office because I had a key. They didn't keep, quote, narcotics in there. Well, they might have, but I didn't know where they were. And they would have been like shot types, which I'd never messed with, but, pills. But they did keep some, non-addictive, non-narcotic stuff like Ultram, and I did some very, very dumb stuff, at nights. And so think of this, you go in there and on a Sunday night and you've got the key, you go in, and all of a sudden someone pulls in the parking lot. And what do you do?
Depend how you want to shit your pants.
Yeah, you get caught in there, and think about it. How humiliating is that to my wife, and how embarrassing. And I mean, it was, dude, I did some horrific things that just, it's unbelievable that, we did separate for a year and a half, 2 years, early on in our marriage, actually, because that's when the opiates kicked in. And I totally believed that I was going to be okay being a weekend dad, I mean, it's just messed up. And then when I got sober, the first time. That was before the rapid detox time. When that fog lifts, that 28 days is no bullshit. When that movie 28 Days, when that fog lifts, man, we were separated and we had built our first home, and I'm in it. She's living at her parents with my second boy was an infant. And man, I couldn't believe what I was doing. And that whole story is a miracle story that happened, that we got back together. It's crazy.
I mean, look, not for nothing, man. I mean, generally speaking, most people that kind of go down that addiction road. I've actually had a lot of folks that have been addicted to many different things on this show, and it's. I mean, obviously, if I'm able to talk to them, for the most part, they have come through the other side.
Yeah.
There's a lot more that don't, and it's really cool to see. I mean, look, not for nothing, my mom died of heroin.
Wow. There's so many people I know that have died from it.
Right. I mean, you're right out there in the Northwest. Heroin is big out in the whole Seattle kind of. You think about the '90s heroin, it's like, oh, this is candy.
Yeah.
It was kind of like the cool thing to do, and there's just so many people that have such a fucked up story after they're they don't. Like, yeah, no, I don't have a story. Why? Because I'm dead. That's why I don't have a story.
That's right.
But it's so cool to see people and have the honor and the opportunity to talk to people like yourself that you went to jail, dude. Like, not for that, but, it just doesn't matter. You still were in the clink for a while. And, you dealt with that. Then you dealt with the addiction itself, then the Crohn's, and then the absolute bitterness and disdain of 8 years after. That's just such a crazy thing, and you didn't go back, and that's the really cool thing, because I think a lot of people, not just even if their life was fine, it's like, oh, I feel great, let me go do some yada yada yada. It's like, because it's one of those things, your brains are stupid. And they will rationalize. It's like, I'm in a good mood, let's do it. I'm in a bad mood, let's do it.
Yeah.
It's like, what? This doesn't make sense. It's like, because reasons. Okay.
So true. It's like they say, when going through recovery, they teach you if you're in a healthy space mentally and you just happen to run across a pill bottle or something, you're 99.9% of the time going to be fine. If you're not in a good place but nothing's around, you're going to be fine. But if you're not in a good place and you happen to run into something, you're screwed.
Right.
And that is so true. But then one of the biggest things I learned going through, as I went through that 8 years, there's a lot of money I spent on coaches and courses and masterminds. And there was a lot of good that came out of it, but that was also me just trying to think there's a secret magic pill out there. There isn't, it's just doing the work. And so as I did the work, and one of the big things that I did learn that I hadn't, my dad was always learning and improving. I saw him do a lot of self-development stuff. And, I went to the high school with the Coveys, Stephen Covey of the Habits of Highly Effective People. My dad was Stephen's dentist and would be at dinner on Sundays. And my dad had just, I used to hate this. He'd say, oh, who can tell me habit number 5 or whatever, But as I look back at that kind of stuff, I realized he was always trying to improve and stuff. And anyway, so as I was working with this group of guys and a coach, one of the things that I had never heard, that really made sense and really changed everything, whether it's business, whether it's, friendships, whether it's your relationship with your, your significant other, is instead of living and working in expectations, work in agreements. And so one of the things that I did is I said, okay, when I was using, one of the biggest frustrations I had, even when I, was starting to, one time when I got sober, like I said, because it happened twice before I finally did the detox, and I was totally done. Even though my wife went through aftercare and as a nurse, she really understood it for the most part, because when patients would come in, or parents of, kids that were, having struggles, they would always call me, and which was great because I love doing that stuff anyway. But if I was, say, making a bad choice, or if I was tempted, she was never the one I would go to. I didn't feel like I could, because I was always judged and felt like I was being treated as a loser and a dumbass. And, and that's not to blame her, because, she'd been put through a whole bunch of shit, and it created a whole bunch of insecurities, and so many different things were created triggers. And so, she didn't consciously see what she was doing. She wasn't consciously doing it. I'm sure of that. But once I got healthy and started to learn some of this stuff, I just said, hey, I have to be able to come to you. I have to be able to talk to you without any of this. And so we created an agreement around that. And, instead of sitting here and expecting anybody to, it's so stupid how we think they should read our minds and think like we're thinking, and I'm not just talking spouses, I'm talking in life,
Yeah.
But if you can communicate and set up the agreements, then you avoid so much conflict and so many problems, because there's no one making assumptions and expecting someone to do something that they don't. And, so that really, that made a big impact on my relationship, particularly with my wife.
Oh yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense. I mean, how many times are little spats kind of made out because, oh, well, I thought, well, did you ask me?
Yeah.
No, but I thought that you thought that I thought, and we thought, and I what?
Yeah. And so often they're just the dumbest things too.
I mean, the wife do it too. It's stupid. We're dumb people.
Yep. But it's crazy.
Yeah, man. I mean, you once again, another redemption story, and I'm not mad about it.
I can tell you, I'm very, very grateful, to be sitting in this spot, because so many aren't. I know so many that aren't, and that's why I do what I do. I mean,
what do you do? That was actually the other thing I wanted to touch on. Like, what do you do now?
Well, I have a couple of different businesses. Had a company forever. In fact, it was one that I fell into when a year out of prison. And I've had a business where we sell internet and TV and home security for years, but it's one that I've never loved, never been proud of, to be honest with you. But we do pretty well. And I'm blessed that I have 3 of my boys that actually work for that company, as well as a software company we have that I believe is probably the best SaaS platform out there, sales and marketing platform for any business, entrepreneur, online business, because it's, instead of having tons of different subscriptions for different tools you need to do certain things. Yeah. It's all under one roof, and that company's called Backbone, backbonelms.io. You can look at that. And then because I kind of got into that telco thing, like I said, by accident, but what we created and the way we tried to make ourselves different was, I know my experience dealing with the big cable or satellite companies and how frustrating it is, especially
I may or may not work for one of them.
Yeah, well, we still may or may not sell for all of them. And we should talk, because I got something. Well, I'll just tell you here in the end. So I had been so frustrated. So when my sales guys would set up a new customer, it didn't matter which provider they worked with, whichever was best for them was what they should be doing. I required that they also gave them the specific number in the office that would reach them, so that they didn't have to deal with corporate and get bounced around. I used to hate so bad calling in. You tell them why you're calling in, and they listen to the whole damn story before they tell you they're the wrong department, and then got to transfer you. And then, you got to start over. And even though, let me write the notes. So when you're transferred, the person's not reading the notes, or they're not. And so you're wasting the time telling them again. So we decided we were going to deal with that stuff for the customer. And it worked pretty well. But like I say, we still have that company. But because I was so frustrated with all that stuff, I started looking for a streaming box years ago, about 5 years ago. And I used to do a lot of stuff overseas, like I'd mentioned, started back in 2003. And they just were so hard to navigate that even my boys, and I mean, I'm semi-techie, but not like the younger generations, it was very difficult for them to find, the programming and stuff. And so I had kept in touch with this one company that was really trying to develop these and, really make it so it worked well. And sure enough, just in the last 6 months, I've been engaged with them. And in fact, we just got our first order 3 weeks ago. and it's called the VC box, and it's unbelievable what it has and how simple it is to navigate. In fact, it even has a voice remote, so you can just tell it what to find you. But it has every national live channels, throughout the whole country, 98 Canadian channels, 100, I think 18 Latino channels, all your pay-per-views, over 60,000 video on demand. And it's just vcstreambox.tv, and there's no subscription. So it's pretty slick. But so those are things. And like I said, I have my podcast, Life After Addiction and Diet, and that's, and I've got my website, and I'm not actively taking on new clients at this time. I mean, if someone reached out and really wanted to help, I would never turn someone down. But it's not something I'm actively doing just because I'm so busy with the others. But the podcast, I absolutely will never stop. And that's dropped every single Monday and has for going on 3 years.
I was going to ask you when that does it. Okay. Because, I mean, obviously, look, I am an entrepreneur myself, obviously, based on me doing the podcast. I work my ass off on it.
Yeah. Dude, you'd be perfect to be on my podcast, especially, that you mentioned your mother. That's got to be tough. And that's perspective.
Listen, I'm always open, man. I mean, I'm going on vacation from the 10th to the 19th of August, but
I'll send you my link because that's what I created that around, and it was to consult and help people. I'll be honest, where I struggled with that, even though I've had a lot of clients, is I would help someone for free. So it was very difficult for me, even though there's nothing wrong with it, charging people to help them, right? Because what Life After Addiction and Diet podcast and my website's about is helping people reclaim basically what I lived through is your past getting in the way of your future. Learn how to reclaim your life through entrepreneurship and mindset.
Look, I'm a firm believer in everyone has a story, whether
everybody,
whatever level of fucked upness it is.
So true.
I think anybody can pull from everyone else's story. And if you can't, then open your eyes and try harder. Because look, I'm more than welcome. Send me the link. We'll schedule something. I'll go on there and I'll bleed my heart out. No worries at all there.
Like you said, it's like life's not easy, man. I don't care who you are. I don't, even though we see.
Look, I'm 37 and I just recently lost a tooth from diabetes.
Really?
Right there. That little bad boy. Yeah. I look like Jim Bob. And it's $3,000 to get that thing fixed.
Oh, yeah.
I have to send a text to your dad and send him over here to
My dad passed away 5 years ago, but I'll tell you what.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Nah, it's okay. In fact, my mom was 11 months later. It was rough, but anyway, like I say, it was time. He had dementia for a few years, and it was just tough.
Oh, yeah.
That teeth thing's so funny. Is my neighbor? We used to go to Lake Powell, our families, when we were kids. His dad was a dentist. My dad was a dentist. And he became a dentist, and very good one. So here I have free dental my whole life. Didn't understand how great that was.
Yeah.
My dad retires, and for some dumb reason, I decide I want veneers on my front 8 teeth, and pay for that to that kid. I call him a kid, my buddy that we used to go to Powell with. And so I get what you're saying. It's so expensive, man.
Look, not to be weird, but I've like this whole conversation, like, God damn, he has like Rex Ryan teeth. I love it. You've ever seen Rex Ryan on TV?
Yeah.
Damn, that man has the beautiful set of chin uppers. I'm like, God damn. He said, Dad's a dentist. Like, yeah, there it is. There it is.
Yeah, I was dumb and didn't ask my dad to do it and then go pay for it about 3 years after he retires. But whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, it's been a pleasure.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I love it.
If just one person hears somebody that, because we all resonate with different people and different styles and different personalities and just different people. Like you say, we all have stories, and life's already tough enough. If we would just understand, like you say, the ego thing, understand that if we would work together and help each other, it's so much easier. That's one big frustration I had, and I'll end on this, is I mentioned I grew up in the Mormon church.
Yeah.
Well, when I get sober, I'm going to AA, right? So here you are in a room with people from all walks of life. And right or wrong, many people we may not even engage with and probably would judge if we weren't in that setting. But the true, sincere care and love that is in those rooms, it almost makes me choke up because it's real and all the other bullshit stripped away. But yet, growing up until 5 years ago, I could go to church meetings and the judgment and bullshit that goes on in there. I feel like saying everyone should be required to go in with a sign around their neck that says, yeah, I fuck up every week too.
Yeah, I'm not
You
a
know,
big religion
no,
person.
dude,
I've always
religion's
kind of
dying.
been like,
It's all about spirituality.
yeah,
Religion.
and that's another thing I've learned over the podcast doing these. Look, this is so widespread out, crazy. Like the last guy I interviewed was a porn addict.
Wow.
Um, completely random and super crazy, great redemption story as well.
Yeah.
But I did someone. He was a spiritual fella, and he came in here. It's like, look, I'm not wearing a cape. I'm not like walking around with chakras and shit. He was just like, look, religion is kind of bullshit. Spirituality is kind of where it's at. And
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, because it very much does feel very culty and very like I grew up Catholic, and it's like you're doing calisthenics in church. It's like, why do my abs hurt? What's going on here?
Yeah.
It's everyone should have whatever relationship they should or want to have on their own basis, and anyone that tells you otherwise,
Bingo. Yeah. There shouldn't be a middleman. To
right.
me, it's all, yeah, to me, religion's man-made, but whatever. But yeah, because it's all, and what, it's just a one-to-one relationship with whatever you define as your God or your source or your creator, whatever that is, you
Right.
know?
And no one should really be able to dictate or judge you, and if they do, go fuck them. Or no, don't go fuck them. Or maybe if they'll change your mind, I don't know. Whatever will work there, I guess.
Yeah, there's going to be some crazy stuff coming out, I believe. It's particularly about, well, it's starting to come out. In fact, I have another podcast I talk a lot about it, but about just the sick, nefarious, satanic ritual abuse that goes on is
Really,
mind-boggling.
I don't know
People
why that intrigued
shocked.
me so much. It shouldn't have, but I
Oh,
like
dude,
I like dark things.
yeah, it intrigued me too, and that's what got me going down that rabbit hole. And the things that I've heard it from too many different people that don't
Yeah,
know each other at all, and they're naming the same type of situation, the same people, including what our church looks at as prophets, which they're not. They're just presidents of a corporation, because that's all the LDS church is. And you don't have a worth of over 200 billion, and you don't. I won't go there, but anyway,
yeah.
you don't support certain things that have been supported in the last 2-3 years. That if Jesus Christ is truly leading you. Anyway.
Look, Steve. Good talk, man. Do you want to plug your stuff again before? Because I'm gonna obviously have you send me all the stuff so I can put it in the show
Sure. I'll
notes
send
and
you
all. But you
something.
want to go ahead and plug your stuff one more time?
Yeah. I mean, if anyone is looking for internet, you can just reach out at advancedhomepros.com. If you're looking to get what I think is the best streaming option out there, you can go to VCSEE, so VSEE streambox.tv.
Is that everywhere, by the way?
Yeah.
You take a gander here, even though I get a super discount, but I'm like, eh.
Yeah, I'll send you a message. You'll be excited
Okay.
about something. And it's crazy because you can take that with you in the world. As long as you got Wi-Fi, you're in business. In fact, my brother got one and called me last week because he was he was meeting some high school buddies. They do something every year, and he took it with him. And there was a UFC fight on last week. I can't remember what it was, but so he called me because he was having problems with the power, but he had the power plugged into the wrong hole in the back. So anyway, but yeah, so I mean, yeah, all of his buddies that were there bought him the next day because they were just blown away, and it's unreal. But yeah, and then if there's any entrepreneur, especially online, you've got to check out backbonelms.io. It is the baddest ass platform out there. And to be totally transparent, it's a platform I've used for 5 years, well, 4.5. We just, we were able to white label. We finally talked the company into it a year ago. They allowed people to white label it. So it's not my technology, but it's incredible because it does everything and anything you'd need to promote, build your business, under one platform. You don't have to have a bunch of subscriptions, one for automation, for email, one for this, one for that. it's got it all. So
Okay.
it's unreal. But yeah, but appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for having me, and
Oh, absolutely,
look
man.
forward to having you on my show. And
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Please take me up, or
I'll email you
take
right
me
now.
up on that. Whatever it is. I don't know. I can't think of a word. I talk for a living, right?
Yeah, and like
Super
you
good
said,
at it.
you don't do this on Sunday often. This is the first one I've done, but it's been a good one, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's kind of wild because I've kept because I work 410s and I
Oh, do
work
you?
tech. Yeah, I work 410s. I work tech support, and
Okay.
I have Sundays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays off, and I've ever since I've been doing this, I've kept those open, and you were the first Sunday. Like, oh, well, all right, fair enough. Broke my Sunday cherry.
Yeah, there you go. Me too. So, all right,
Was it good
brother.
for you?
Yeah, it was really good, man.
No. All right, buddy. Well, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for coming on and taking out the Sunday time.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, buddy.
Talk to
Thank
you
you.
later. See you.
Bye.